Hello friends, welcome back to Digitalk. In this video, I am going to explain you about a very important concept of Weblogic Server, which is called the Weblogic Server migration. Okay, you also called a Weblogic Server whole server migration or a service migration. Okay, apart from that, I am going to discuss about the pinned or singleton services. Okay, and then we'll see a demonstration how we can migrate the JMS services. So before we going ahead with the migration, okay, so let us talk about the high availability option, where we have a different kind of availability options in Weblogic Server. For example, cluster, where we have a group of managed servers running in a cluster for providing the load balancing and failover kind of capabilities, right? So that is all the solution for to provide the high availability of the applications. Okay, and we know about that when we deploy the application in Weblogic Server, especially where we have the cluster configured, then we deploy the application across the cluster so that it can be deployed in all the managed server which is there in the cluster, so that in case any of your managed server goes down, your application should be accessible from the other services, right? So this is the concept of high availability in the Weblogic Server. But when we go for migration, then the question is, when we have a cluster for high availability and the failover concept, then what is migration and why it is required? Okay, so let us discuss about in detail. Okay, the first question is when we talk about the pin services, okay, that is also called as singleton services. Okay, so we have a different kind of services in Weblogic, okay, and but some of the services are called a pin services or a singleton services like JMS or JTA transaction recovery. Okay, so JTA is JMS is a Java messaging system which is used for to provide the communication between different applications, right? The message which need to be communicated from application 1 to application B or for certain kind of processing. And then we have a JTA kind of transaction. That means when you have a transaction in your Weblogic Server, that means you have a Weblogic Server where you have a certain kind of applications, and then you have a certain kind of a code which is going to access your different databases across your different applications. Okay, and then we are going to insert, update, or delete the record in all of your databases all together at the same time. So that is a concept of distributed transactions, right? So if you have a JMS kind of a services or a JTA kind of a services, okay, in your Weblogic Server, okay, that these services are called singleton services. Okay, so why we call it as a singleton services specifically, if you are not very clear on JTA transactions, if you have a certain kind of a clarity on JMS, okay, then we have a lot of applications where we need messages to be processed only once, not twice. Okay, we don't want the duplicity of the messages. For example, if you want to process some financial or transactions related data, right? So that transactions or financial related data need to be processed only once. Right, so that means if it is coming to your system, coming to your applications, either it is WebLogic or any of the messaging system, it has to be processed only one time. Okay, and for that, when we defined a JMS kind of a resources in Weblogic Server, okay, that we are going to discuss in the next few screens as well, where I will show you a demonstration. Then why we call it as singleton services and how we do the configuration of JMS services. Okay, why we are telling it as a pinned or singleton services. Okay, so now apart from that, when we talk about the capabilities of Weblogic Server in terms of migration, okay, so we have a two kind of a migration. One is called a whole server migration. That means your complete managed server is getting migrated from one machine to different machine, or either the same machine, but your whole server is getting migrated. And second is your service level migration. Okay, that means you are, instead of migrating the whole server, you are migrating the services which is deployed on a particular managed server. Right, so if you are completely moving a server from one location, one machine to different machine, or maybe within a machine from managed server 1 to a different managed server 2, okay, then it is called a whole server migration. And when we talk about the service levels migration, for example, as I said, we have a JMS applications which is deployed on a particular managed server. Okay, so we can have an option where we can migrate the JMS services from managed server 1 to managed server 2. Okay, in case of any problem you got with the managed server 1, your JMS services, which is a singleton services, will be migrated to JMS to managed server 2. And this I am going to show in a demonstration how we can enable the migration in Weblogic Server and how you can migrate your JMS services from one of the managed server to different managed servers. Now, when we specifically talk about Weblogic, then we have a three kind of a pinned service, you can say. One is a JMS related. As I said, we have a JMS services in Weblogic for communication between applications. So this is called as a singleton application. Second is, as I said again, that JTA transaction recovery services. If you have a transactions in Weblogic Server, okay, and if you have certain transactions in under process and your system get crash, okay, then your transaction gets same somewhere, either in database or then it is in file system level. And once your services are up, that transaction need to be recovered. those are got stuck when your server went down. Okay, so this GTA is also singleton services. Apart from that, third is you can also say user defined singleton services. Maybe you have some custom specific code which you have deployed on only a single managed server. Maybe certain regions that would be a singleton services, and that services can also be migrated. Okay. Now, one important concept with respect to the migration is leasing. Okay, so WebLogic Server ensure the singleton services such as JMS services run only on a single server in a cluster any time by using the concept of leasing, which ensure that only one instance in the cluster owns a service. So, as I said, it is a singleton services. That means it has to be run only on only one managed server. Okay, so there is leasing as a feature with track and completely own the leasing of your singleton applications. That means it ensures that it is running only on one and only one managed server at a time. Okay, for example, if your singleton JMS service is running on managed server 2, and in case you got some problem with the managed server 1, it will be migrated to server 2, or after some time you may be possible that managed server again come 1, but at that time it will identify that now the services are running managed server now on managed server 2. Okay, so leasing ensure that your singleton services are running on only and only single managed server. So we have two different options. One is the database leasing, okay, and second is consensus based leasing. Okay, so I will show you the example of consensus based leasing, how we can configure this consensus based leasing for the migration. Now let us come to the demo. Okay, so what we are going to see in the demo is I will explain you in next couple of slides with the action plan. So as of now, you can see I have a domain where I have two managed servers are running with the name of ms_1 and ms_2, right? Those are inside a cluster with name demo cluster. Okay, and when we create a managed server in Weblogic Server now, so it automatically create the migratable target as well, which you can easily see from the cluster and then inside the migratable target. So go to admin console, click on clusters, and then click on migratable targets. As soon as you will create any of the managed server, a corresponding migratable target will also get created inside the migratable targets. Okay, so but this will only create the target for you. Okay, but if you see the migration policy, it is manual service migration only. That means migration is not enabled, it only created a migratable target for you. If you want to go for the migration, so you have two options: either you can go for manual migrations or you can enable the auto migrations as well, so that there is no manual intervene is required. So by default it is manual service migration. That means by default migration is not enabled. So I will show you how to enable the auto migration in case of your services goes down. Now the high level step for JMS service configuration is that because we are going to see how we can migrate the JMS services. Okay, so you should be clear on the JMS concept. So I have posted few videos and with complete end-to-end details how we can configure the JMS resources with the basic concept, with the executions and demos, how we can configure the JMS resources, how we can deploy the applications, and then how we can send the messages and how we can monitor the messages from the JMS console as well. Okay, so in a nutshell, if we say that we are going for the demo here as well, how we can go for that one. What we wanted to achieve is that we have a JMS system which is deployed on managed server 1. Okay, and in case your managed server goes down, your JMS services should migrate to your managed server 2, right? So what is our basic structure in that? We have two managed servers in the cluster, managed server 1 and managed server 2. Migratable targets are automatically created for you by the WebLogic, right? After that, I will create a JMS server with name JMS server 1, which I am going to target to managed server 1. Okay, and then I will attach a persistent store with my JMS server, right? So persistent store is a physical entity. That means you have to specify a location in your file system level if you are going to use a file system based persistent store, where all the messages those are coming to your queue will be get stored. So first I will create a JMS server, then I will target it to the managed server, and once I will create a JMS server, then during that same period I will create a persistent store as well, which I will attach with my JMS server, right? After that I will create a JMS module. The JMS module is a group of resources, so I will target JMS module to my cluster. Okay, after that I will create a connection factory to create the connection to my JMS system, and then I will create a queue, right, where I'm going to send the messages. And my connection factory and queue will always target to my JMS server, right, because it is a singleton services and JMS is the physical, or you can say the logical entity for storing the messages. So all the resources, connection factory and queue, will be targeted to my JMS server. So this is the basic structure that I will create for testing purpose. Okay, and this I have shown in a few more videos as well with a step-by-step instruction. If you want that, you can go to my channel and then explore the JMS topic inside my channel, and then you will see a lot of videos on that one, which will give you the clarity if you're not very clear on this part. Okay, so the testing part, what I'm going to test and how I'm going to test is that I will send the messages in my queue, which is deployed on managed server 1. After that, I will bring down my managed server 1, and then I will again try to send the messages from the managed server 2. Okay, and then I will see if the messages are getting posted or not. Okay, now first I will create a JMS server. This is again giving for you to clarity. Okay, as I said again, if you are not very clear on this part, you explore my channel and go for the JMS sessions and then see the basic concept of JMS servers and persistent stores, and then the connection factory and the queues as well. Okay, but in short I'm going to explain again here as well. So first I will create a JMS server. Go to console, click on JMS servers, and then give a name for your JMS server, right? And then inside that, as I said, you have to create a persistent store. Okay, then click on create a new store. After that, I will set a file store base. Okay, there are two type of file store, file store and JDBC. So I'm going to create a file store base, right? After that, you can give a name to your persistent store and the location where you want to save your messages. Okay, and the next important part, when you are going to target, okay, when we are not enabling the migration feature, we directly target our JMS server to our managed server. But when we want to enable the feature of migration, then we have to target our JMS server and again along with that persistent store to my migratable target. So the corresponding migratable target for my managed server 1 is managed ms_1 and then migratable. So I will target here my persistent store to my migratable target, right? And then your store is ready. Okay, and then you have to target your JMS server again to the managed server 1 migratable. So what I am doing here is that I have created a JMS server. I have attached a persistent store to my JMS server, and I have targeted my JMS server as well as my persistent store to the MS1 migratable target. Okay, now you can see my JMS server is created. Inside that, I have a persistent store, and the target for my JMS server and my persistent store is MS1 managed server 1 migratable. Okay, now create JMS resources. Okay, that means I will create a JMS module. Inside that, I will create a sub deployment, which will be a collection of my different resources. So what are the resources? In my case, a connection factory and then a queue. Right. So first you have to create a JMS module. For that, you can go to admin console, click on JMS module, click on new, then give a name to your JMS module and target your JMS module to cluster. And why to cluster? Because the JMS module is a complete specific to a domain level. So that means inside the JMS module, you can create different kind of resources like connection factories, queues, topic, distributed queues, and according to your requirement, you can group all the resources in particular sub deployment, and then that particular sub deployment will target to corresponding JMS servers, but the scope of module will be cluster level. So target your JMS module to cluster level and then click on finish. Now you will see that JMS module is created. Now you have to click on JMS module, and when we are doing it, we are creating a sub deployment. So click on sub deployment tab, give a name to a sub deployment. Okay, and that target for your sub deployment would be JMS server, right? Because as I said, the resources that we create inside the JMS module would be grouped under a sub modules or sub deployments, and sub deployment get targeted to a particular JMS server. Okay, so select the target as a JMS server for your sub deployment. Now you can see that your sub deployment is created with the target as the JMS server of my managed server 1. Now I will create a connection factory and then a queue. So first create a connection factory. For that, click on your JMS module. After that, click on your new and then select the connection factory and then give a name to your connection factory. And the important thing is to specify the JNDI name. So this JNDI name is a very important thing because your application look up for this particular JMS connection resource. Like I'm creating connection factory, so the application will look for the connection factory with the help of this JNDI. That means whatever the JNDI your name you are specifying here, it should be defined inside your application code as well. Okay, so the testing code that I have with myself, okay, inside that I have defined the connection factory name, JNDI name, as I have specified on the screen, right? After that, you have to click on the advanced targeting because we want to target our connection factory to my JMS sub deployment, right? So click on advanced targeting and then select your sub deployment, and then it will automatically select for you the JMS servers, right? So you can see that your connection factory is ready. So next I am going to create a queue. So again, click on your JMS module, click on new, and then now select the queue. Okay, and then give a name to your queue. And again, as I said, the important entity in terms of connection factory was JNDI name. Similarly, the important entity in case of your queue is the JNDI name for your queue, and your application will look for this queue with the help of this particular JNDI name. And I have defined the name that you are seeing on the screen in my application, right? And I will select the option for deployment is sub deployment, and then I will select my JMS services. Now my connection factory and queue are ready. So what we have done so far, we have 2 managed server in the cluster, and we wanted to achieve the migration from managed server 1 to managed server 2 for my JMS applications resources, right? So for that, I have created a JMS server which I have targeted to my managed server 1. Along with my JMS server, I have a persistent store attached to my JMS server 1. Right. After that, I have created a JMS module. Inside my JMS module, I have created a sub deployment and then 2 resources called connection factory and queue, right, which I have targeted to my JMS server. Now, when I will send the messages to my managed server 1, the messages will get stored in the queue, which is targeted to my JMS server 1, right? And then I will going to test how the migration of my services. So now you can see that no message in the queue. So as of now, I have created the messages resources, but there is no message in the queue. So for that monitoring, you can click on your JMS module, then click on your queue. And once you will click on your queue, click on the monitoring tab, and you will see there is no messages. Okay. Now I have a demo application with myself, okay, which send the message to a queue and then which read the message from the queue as well. So here you can see the application that I'm using is queue send application. Okay. And the URL that I have given with the port number of my managed server 1, which is 7003. Okay. So if you need this particular code for testing purpose, you can write to my email ID, which I will show you on the last screen, and I will send back to you this code. Okay. Now I am going to send few messages in my queue. Once I have sent the messages, when you can go back to your Weblogic console, you will see the messages are shown on the screen under the monitoring tab. So you can see the message count is 6 because I have sent the 6 messages, which is the messages total as of now. Right. Now you can see that once you will go to Weblogic console, click on manage server name, and then you will see a link to view JNDI. So once you will click on the JNDI, you will see that my connection factory and my queue name, JNDI names, are visible inside the JNDI tree of my both of managed servers, managed server 1 and managed server 2. Right. So now you have to update the node manager consensus. Okay, as I said, you have a 2 kind of a leasing in Weblogic server for migration enable. One is the database leasing, second is the consensus. So I am showing you the automatic migration with the help of consensus. Okay, so for that you have to enable the consensus. For that, go to your admin console, click on your cluster name. Okay, after click on cluster name, click on configurations and then migration tab. Inside that, you have to select the candidate machine for migratable servers. So in case you have a multiple machines and you want to migrate the services from machine 1 to machine 2 managed server, okay, then for that you have to select the machine. So for me, I have both managed server in the same machine on node 1. So I have selected my machine node 1 because my managed server 2 for which I want to migrate the services is running on the same machine. And then migration basis select consensus. Okay, so this is the only configuration that we need to be configured inside the cluster and migration tab. Once it is done, you have to configure the service migration policy, because as I shown you on the last screen, the default migration policy is your manual. Now I am going to show you the automatic migration. So for that, you have to click on the migratable target. Okay, so I have the migratable target MS1 and MS2. So click on the migratable target on MS1. Okay, to which I have deployed all the resources. Then click on configuration and migration tab. After that, click the service migration policy as auto migration exactly once services. Okay, so there are 2 or 3 options are there for when we talk about the service migration policy that I will cover in the some other lecture. Okay, but as of now, you can consider to select this option only, which is auto migrate exactly one services. Inside constraint candidate servers, you have to select the servers onto which you want to run the services. So in my case, I have 2 managed servers, and I want my JMS services to be migrated from managed server 1 to managed server 2. So I have selected both of my managed servers inside the constraint candidate servers. So this is all the configurations of your migration. Now we are going to test it. Okay, so now you can see that my managed server 1 is down. Okay, I have brought down my managed server, right? So initially I have sent a few messages in my managed server 1. Now I have brought down the managed server 1. Okay, I have only managed server 2 is running. Okay, now I will send the message to managed server 2. Okay, remember, and because when I had created my JMS resources, I have targeted my all the JMS resources to JMS to managed server 1. That is, no none of the JMS resources targeted to manage server 2. But now here, if I will send the message to my manage server 2, that means using the manage server 2, here you can see the port I have specified 7004, which was 7003 initially when I had sent the messages to manage server 1. Now I brought down my manage server 1 and I am sending on the messages with the help of the manage server 2, which is running on 7004 port. Okay. And once again you go to screen, then you will see that message count is now 10. Initially I have sent the messages with the help of manage server 1, the count was 6. Now after brought down the manage server 1, I have sent the messages from manage server 2, okay, and it is posted in your message queue. Right, so this show how we can enable the auto migration for the JMS services in Weblogic Server. If you need the code or any kind of questions or query, you can write back to me on digitalkfmw@gmail.com. I will revert back to you as soon as possible.